Good morning, Philippines. Good morning, world. It's 7:26 in the morning, Wednesday, April 20. Breaking news exclusive in CNN Philippines. Communication in various purposes has been a hot issue now. So today's news will include 4 subtopics: purpose of communication, speeches and public speaking, types of speeches, and interview. Communication is made for numerous purposes. Communication, whether in writing, face-to-face, or via media such as television and the internet, is a social process that involves the transfer of information and understanding from one person to another. Communication varies depending on the purpose and the way the message are crafted on the intention of the sender. Let us discuss about the purpose of communication with Pearl Jeef Amakna. Pearl?
Thank you so much, Giselle. At this moment, netizens, with so much kaganapan for today's video, why not learn something about the purpose of communication? So let's not make it so dugay. To start with, the first example of purpose of communication is the informative communication. So what is informative communication? So it convey information factually. So this means that it is very objective, that is a truthful and unbiased view of the topics being considered when people share knowledge about the world in which we live in. So they are participating in the process of informative communication. So informative messages attempt to present objectivity that is truthful enough and unbiased view of topics being considered. So another meaning for the informative communication is that it generally centers on talking about the people, events, processes, places, or things. So this means that informative communication generally mo focus gid siya sa pag-talk about sa mga people, sa mga events, processes, places, or things. However, informing an audience about one of these subjects without being persuasive is oftentimes a difficult task to complete. So another meaning for informative communication is that its goal is to input new learning, enhance prior knowledge, confirm a concept, alleviate comprehension of an idea, or explain in a process or procedure. So this means that it should help the audience to understand the subject better and to remember what they learned later. So the goal of this type of communication is not to control the audience to the speaker's point of view. Instead, the details need to be led before the audience so that they can make an educated decision or learn about a subject they are concerned about. So I hope that is very understandable at the end of my audience, no? So examples of informative communications are informative speeches na mahitabo. For example, mahitabo siya sa college, no, college professors lecturing on a specific topic during a class. So another example is presentation, reports, informative essays, visual aids. So presentation, reports, informative essays, and visual aids commonly appear in one setting usually. So moving forward, we are going now to tackle about tips for doing an informative presentation. So number 1 tip is to stick to the facts. So this means that state facts and dapat imong mga claims should be based on factual evidences. Dili kay patakag bungat without even considering the information's credibility. So the second tip is to avoid repetition. No? Be mindful on the things you utter. It may be redundant na ang imuhang meaning sa imuhang message is mausab na hinuon siya at some point. No, the third tip is to make it clear. Make your message clear, no? Very understandable na siya. Kung sabi siya pa, klaruha ka na imuhang gipangyawit. Yes, so according to Osborne 2009, he purports that informative communication arises out of three deep impulses. The first one is we seek to expand our awareness of the world around us. So this statement profess that marites, ang kanang mga maayo nga mga marites, mga good marites, always exist in any form of life. Because of our will to expand our horizon, we seek answers, and by seeking answers, we gain awareness. No? So the second one is we seek to become more competent. No, human as we are, we aim for greater things in life. We want to impact lives. In return, we vision ourselves to be good as other people. So the third one, or the last one reason nga no kunong mo undergo ta informative communication is that we have an abiding curiosity about how things work and how they are made. So our world is full of mystery. So kitang mga kulang og aruga and curious sa mga butang-butang, we seek for mga answers and mga questions nga dapat unsa man jud ni siya. Nga naman nahitabo na siya. No, but sometimes guys, curiosity is na-adjoy batik nga implikasyon sa ato ang kinabuhi. And ato adjong hinumduman is to be mindful of how we act or how we deliver our information. I hope nasabdan ra about sa informative communication. And we are moving on the second example of purpose of communication, which is the persuasive communication. So it is a message that is intended to shape, reinforce, or change the responses of another or other people. So to change the responses of other people usually happens when there are words that are coercive at some point. So example ani is like kana ganin mong friend nga i-like na akong profile ha, bantay lagi ka. So it is pushing across an idea that convincing people or readers to support the idea you want to convey or ganahan ka nga mahitabo. Okay, examples of persuasive communications are in the TV, nasa TV, commercials, periodical, advertisements, billboards, research and business proposals, no? Very common kayo na mga persuasive na mga communication nga mga aspeto. So that's one is the persuasive message. So all of the mentioned examples wanted to convince us, no, it may be dapat mamalitaan na or ato na siyang buhaton because this is the very essence of a persuasive communication. Dapat na agad siya ma-convince na people. Okay? And now, moving on to the tips for doing a persuasive presentation. So number one tip is to create an emotional connection between you and your listeners. No? When you persuade, dapat with feelings. No? Dapat tayo emotions. No? So the second one is to tell them a story or two story. So marites siya na sad. But the story should be based on true experiences. Kaya na among mga tao nga hangin kayo mga istorya, no? Especially ka ng mga bad marites, ka ng mga panilina ng mga tao ilahang ipangkalat, di na siya pwede. Dapat factual kita. So speak with conviction, the third one. So speak your story in a way that listeners will be convinced along with showing your emotions. So dapat convincing with emotions, no? Provide a choice of alternative solutions. If the solutions presented do not suffice the need of the listeners, there should be an alternative for the listeners not to impose doubt about your point. Dapat ingana gud siya, no? So I hope you understand, no, a very little discussion about persuasive, but I hope na agad ko na impart ng knowledge sa ato ang audience right now. So moving on to the last part of example of purpose of communication is the argumentative communication. So argumentative communication tries to make listeners or the readers to believe that your idea is better based on the various reasons that you have at hand. So argumentative is somewhat similar to persuasion, but there is something we need to consider. No, in argumentative, it is mediated to convince people based on reasons and facts. While in persuasion, there is the emotion that guides its effectiveness. No, it involves two or more responding to one another's claim and support for such a claim. So of course, there must be two opposing people which carry an individual standpoint, and later on, they will present their view. No. Another one is, it is a logical and reasoned way to demonstrate one's point of view, belief, conclusion, or position. So in argumentative, there is what we call a logical reasoning and critical thinking aspect should a must have upon delivering arguments. No, I hope that is very understandable, no? So let's move on to the examples of argumentative communication. So argumentative communication happens on debate, meeting the avance, court hearings, and argumentative speeches. No, diha yung kasagaran mo, lugwa ang ato ang argumentative communication. So, proceed to our tips for doing an argumentative presentation, no? Number one tip, it is a one-way debate. So, it is the presentation of reasons for each point. So, naadyo na duha ka buok, then dapat magdebate mong duha. Okay, move the reader to action. This is a crucial part of argumentative presentation since you must inspire your audience and contribute to their well-being. Dapat ma-inspire sila and makakuha sila lessons sa imuhang argumentatives or imuhang arguments. So, last one is end with a punch. No, end with a powerful message. Dili kay sumbagon nimo imuhang opponent. So, dapat na adjud kay eloquent nga message kay imo i-deliver para namutatak sa mga nauna sa ato ang audience. So, according to Lucas 2007, he claims that to avoid defective argumentation, the following must be avoided. Okay? So, defective evidence. Okay, present evidence that is reliable and dili ka nang himo-himo ra. Dili pwede nga marites ana nga sige rag himo-himo storya. So marites di ko pwede ang argumentative ha chart. So misuse of facts, no, use factual content to support your point. May pawala na lang ka nag-debate if ever dili da ito imo hingis pang sulti, no. Yes, ato na mi kayan. So another one is the inappropriate evidence. Now, use pieces of evidence according to your point. Do not ponder more on unnecessary pieces of information. Dili magpabibo. Okay? Okay, and then, defective patterns of reasoning. Your presentation of reason must be organized. Your point must be clear. No, dapat inana jud na kay para sayon na masabtan. And the last one is the evidential fallacies. So fallacies can be either illegitimate arguments or irrelevant points and are often identified because they lack evidence that support their claim. So dapat tinuod og sakto big imuhang ipang tabi. Okay, that's all with my report. I hope na amo nakatunan sa ako ang discussion, and that's it for today's video. Back to you, Giselle.
Thank you, Pearl. Here is Alessandra Amaya for speeches and public speaking. Alessandra?
The purpose of public speaking is found to be crucial in all sorts of fields. Public speaking involves sharing ideas with other people in public, formally give life before an audience. It has a prominent place in business, government, and academia, with the idea using it to inform, instruct, entertain, and persuade. The principal purpose of this kind of speech is found in these four techniques. Informative. This speech serves to provide interesting and useful information to your audience. It focuses on explaining a concept or ideas within a specific subject matter, including people, places, and stories, with guaranteed factual information and evidence-based research. It could be observed in medical conferences or when a professor is lecturing a class. Demonstrative. This has many similarities to an informative speech. However, it contains actions or demonstrations to clearly illustrate the topic. It must focus not only on verbal but also on non-verbal aspects, especially the facial expressions and the activities execution. Typically used in the demonstration and launch of a new product, or simply presenting an object to focus on. Persuasive. A persuasive speech works to convince people to change in some way. The way they think, the way they do something, or to start doing something. This encompasses a wide spectrum that stretches to your political views, beliefs, and behavior. It is mostly used by business people to market their products and services, politicians to obtain people's trust, and lawyers to try to persuade judges to rule in their favor. Entertaining. The speaker provides pleasure and enjoyment that makes the audience laugh or identify with anecdotal information. This popular form of public speaking happens in informal settings. It delivers through stand-up comedy or storytelling and can be motivational at times. It might be a speech at celebration like weddings and work. This is also John Maya reporting. Back to you, Giselle.
Thank you, Alessandra. To talk about three major differences between conversation and public speaking, here we have in line Sybil Rose Andrew. Sybil?
Yes, Giselle, there are major differences between conversation and public speaking according to Lucas 2015. According to him, first, public speaking is more highly structured than a conversation because public speaking has the agenda of meeting its objectives of delivering it. In this sense, a public speaker must first identify whether he is speaking to inform, persuade, or entertain the audience and focus on this to create a highly structured speech guided by his objective. Second, public speaking requires a more formal language. This means adopting more formal and professional tone of voice while speaking. Public speaking is used in a formal setting, unlike conversation that can be used in a casual and informal social setting. It is also addressed to the public, thus it needs to be formal for the speaker to effectively achieve the purpose of his speech. Third, public speaking requires a different method of delivery. So here are several ways of delivering a speech in the public or the methods of delivery. So first we have read. A read speech or reading from a manuscript is a word-for-word iteration of a written message. The speaker makes the entire speech by referring to the printed document or a scene on the teleprompter. This is used to deliver exact and accurate information so there is no room for errors. News reporting industry, for example, uses the method to deliver precise and accurate information to the audience. Errors in reporting decrease the credibility of the news organization and the newscaster, so that is why this method is the best way for them. Second, we have the memorize. The memorized speech is a recitation of a written message that the speaker has memorized. This also uses manuscripts, but the speaker had to recite the manuscript word for word and deliver it to the public. A good example of this is an oratory speech. Third, we have an impromptu. An impromptu speech is not rehearsed. This type of speaking is a presentation of a short message without prior preparation. An example of this method is the question and answer portion of Miss Universe. They are asked a question and then required to deliver their answer on the spot without prior preparation. Fourth, we have extemporaneous. An extemporaneous speech is the presentation of a planned and rehearsed speech using minimal notes. Extemporaneous speakers are well aware of their topics and prepare the topic well and then deliver it spontaneously. It does not involve memorization. Instead, there are short notes where the author jots down all the important points in an appropriate sequence. An example of this is a business presentation. The presenter speaks based on the projected slide. So that's all from here. Back to you, Giselle.
Thank you, Sybil, for the introduction of interview live in Masbate. Heiko Marie Amores. Heiko?
Thank you, Giselle. And now, at this juncture, let us talk about interview. So, what comes in mind after hearing the word interview? Fast talk, hot seat, a bunch of questions, question and answer? You got that right. According to our researchers, an interview is a two-way interaction or a one-on-one conversation between an interviewer and an interviewee in which at least one of the parties has a specific serious purpose, and that usually involves asking and answering questions for the sole reason of providing information that may immediately be used by the audience or serve its purpose for later. Commonly, interviews come in a variety of forms such as job interviews, media interviews, student council interviews, research purposes, and such things. Those are examples of interviews that happen in real life. Have you experienced being interviewed, or have you tried interviewing someone? Well, I think we all did. Live from Masbate, this is Heiko Amores reporting. Back to you, Giselle.
Thank you, Heiko. To deeply understand, here is Gisril Amaya to tackle about the characteristics of an interview. Gisril?
Thank you, Giselle. Hello, viewers. We are live here in Mantalangan, Dalagari. Let us delve more the characteristics of an interview and how to craft it before and during an interview proper. Now, let us discuss the characteristics of an interview. First, interviews always involve two parties. Of course, communication consists of the sender and receiver for it to be effectively delivered. In an interview, it consists of the interviewee, the sender, and the interviewer, the receiver. The second characteristic of an interview is that interview is also purposeful. Okay, first, let us define purposeful. It is a combination of the words purpose and useful, or shall I say, useful purpose. This type of formal communication allows the interviewer and the interviewee to get his purpose, which is to connect or acquire information. The last characteristic of an interview is that there is a focus on asking and answering a question. Most of the questions is in the form of open-ended question. By the description itself, we can infer that interview uses transactional model of communication. At this point, let us discuss on how to plan an interview as defined by Adler. First, define the goal. The first step and the most important is your goal. Every plan must have an objective, a fundamental element that drives the overall process. The second one is identify and analyze the other party or your respondent. You must study well your respondent. Your respondent may be a student, a local resident, job seeker, among others. Your level of questions relies on the type of your respondent. Be sensitive with their profile. The third one is prepare a list of topic. This topic are your subject in conducting an interview. This is the meat of an interview. Next is that you have to choose the best interview structure, which is a detailed interview guide. Now, there are 4 interview structure. First is structured, means that standardized interview. Questions are predetermined and in order. Next is unstructured. None of the questions are predetermined. Third one is semi-structured. A few questions are predetermined, whereas the other questions are not planned. Lastly, focused group interview. These questions are presented to a group instead of an individual. Then, you have to consider possible question, and lastly, arrange the setting. Setting refers to the context or the place for which interview takes place. At this point, let us discuss on how to conduct an interview. First, open with a greeting and an orientation. Since interview is an example of a formal communication, you start with salutation. You may start with good morning and then redirect with an overview of your topic so that they will be oriented or provided with the background of your interview. Next is that you have to perform several tasks during the question and answer phase of discussion. You are going to ask questions to the interviewee because it means that you attentively listening or having interest for what he or she said. It can stimulate healthy and ongoing communication process. Aside from that, you acquire information you are needed. The last part is close with satisfactory question. This is the last part of an interview where you utter or conclude the interview with a satisfactory question. That concludes my talk. Back to you, Giselle.
Thank you, Just Thank you, reporters. Again, this is Jocelyn Binliro Antito, your anchor in CNN Philippines. Thank you for being with us today.